Hey guys, this is Bearwire for HUSNG.com. So here I have a second hand following up on the previous sample video. If you haven't seen that first, I would check it out before this one. What I'm talking about here is turn and river check raising decisions. The previous video outlined a situation to check raise the turn, excuse me, to check raise the turn, and this one's going to outline a situation to check raise the river. We're playing the same match against the same opponent, about 130 big blinds deep this time, and we're going to defend King 7 offsuit. Here, I think, with King High, backdoor heart draw, I think we have a very clear check call. This is a board that I may decide to implement a check raising range on the flop, but for the sake of this hand, that's not going to happen. I don't think it makes any sense to check raise with a hand this strong on the flop. So I check call, and we get a really interesting turn card. The thing about this turn, first of all, I think that in the situations where he decides to bet the turn, I think his river barrel frequency is going to be reasonably high. He's going to be trying to get me off of the hands that sort of improve on this turn, and he's also going to have like a more polarized range himself once he bets this turn, because I don't think he's ever going to barrel a 5 or a 6 here, knowing that I have 9-7, 9-8, and 7-8 in my range as far as like hands that improved on this turn and he no longer beats. So it doesn't really make sense for him to bet any thinner than an ace here, and an ace is generally speaking going to be strong enough to bet 3 streets. So I think that both his bluffs and his value hands are going to tend to bet 3 streets here once they bet the turn. There is an option for me to check raise the turn here despite all that. But my issue is that I do think that a lot of his bluffs not only lose to King High, but also have good equity against King High, so putting in a raise really doesn't work in either direction. It just seems like a lot of money invested on the turn to try and blow him off of something on the river, because depending on what the river is, I may not be able to get him off of enough of his range. So I'd rather wait until the river to sort of make a better decision in that case. So I check call, knowing that he's going to sort of bet for me on the river a high percentage of the time, so I don't really run into the issue of him having like a random bluff that beats King 7 and like showing down bad against it or something like that. So we get a jack river, which is actually a really good spot in my opinion. A lot of his bluffs missed, and a lot of, I guess I should say his value range doesn't substantially improve. His most likely value hands are still 1 and 2 pair. No flushes get there, so he doesn't have like a substantial amount of 5 card hands in his range. And I block 7-8 with my 7, which is also important, as far as just me deciding what I'm going to bluff with on the river here. So I think this is a perfect opportunity to check raise bluff on the river. This was essentially the plan from the turn, so it's not really any different. But if the river was, for example, like a 7 or a club or a heart, I may back off on my plan to check raise the river, because he's going to have a lot more hands in his range that are like improved from bluffs to very strong hands that won't fold to a check raise. And he'll also check behind a lot of his thin value hands on those cards, whereas on this card I expect him to bet, you know, almost every ace and every 2 pair. And those hands are going to be in a tough spot against a river check raise here. Going back to the turn, just for discussion's sake, I don't think there's a whole lot of hands I would want to check raise the turn with, but an example would just be a weaker showdown hand that has a draw here. So if I had like 7-4, or maybe backdoor clubs of some kind, like 10-7 of clubs that I floated on the flop, or Jack 7 of clubs that I floated on the flop, those all kind of make sense for me to check raise. But again, like especially the combo draws are strong enough to check call, so I think that if that's the case, it kind of makes sense to just wait until the river to put in the raise, because there's like a pretty low risk of him showing down in position on this type of board. So that's going to be a primary decision-making factor for me, is whether or not I think he's going to take showdown on the river. I think that covers everything I wanted to in this video, so I hope you enjoyed it, and good luck at the tables.